Hey everybody, who's your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking season 1 of the show Lucifer. Now this show is based on the old Neil Gaiman Vertigo comic of the same name, and stars, Lucifer, with the core idea being the devil gets sick of hanging out in hell, moves to LA and opens up a piano bar. Now that's sort of an unusual choice for a TV series, and no doubt about it, the show definitely does take a significant departure from the source material. Now, I haven't read very much of the Lucifer comic book series, so I don't know a huge amount about it, but I have read at least a little bit. Um, and yeah, it is a fair criticism of the show to say that it does not stick terribly close to the comics. In fact, some people have gone so far as to say it's just basically the sort of the show is basically the comic in name only. I think that's a little bit unfair. Um, Now, granted, there's a lot of stuff in here that is just nothing like the comic. I mean, here at the end of the day, it's basically Lucifer teams up with a cop to solve various mysteries and deal with heaven and hell stuff on his own time, which of course gets mixed in with the two. All right, there's nothing really like that in the comics. It was that a lot of that heaven and hell stuff, but certainly not you know Lucifer going out in hell trying to solve murder mysteries and whatnot. So yeah, I do understand that. But one of the big things in the comic and in the TV show is sort of the philosophy of the character. Lucifer's perspective on his situation, the higher the deal between heaven and hell, his perspective on humanity, which I think the show does a good job of keeping at the core of the character. And in all fairness, trying to do a lot of that stuff from the comics would just really be not very workable on TV. If you'd wanted to do something like that with the comics, you'd have probably needed something like a Netflix series with a very hefty budget, and people willing to take some major chances and kind of go in directions you don't really normally see in TV and such. Here, kind of taking it here and inserting the character into sort of basically your kind of traditional cop show in a sort of way is a brilliant stroke. I mean, the idea, if you imagine if you'd never even heard of this comic book series and somebody told you, hey, there's this TV show where the devil works for the cop to solve mysteries. It's like, that's oddly intriguing. And it is. The great part of it is that, Lucifer, he's just doing this for fun. And because here in the show, he sort of likes the idea of punishing people who are guilty of having done bad things. In the comics, the character was really just mostly about himself and being pissed off at God. Yeah. Here, Lucifer will not really go out of his way to help people, but will occasionally, if it suits him. Meanwhile, in the comics, as I understand it, that Lucifer was very big on just kind of letting people stumble blindly to their doom and not lifting a finger unless there was something in it for him. So, yes, they have taken the character and made him a little bit more heroic, more acceptable for the mainstream audience. And I can understand why people who are fans of the original stories might not like that. But again, that series was something that had its heyday about 20 years ago. So trying to directly translate that too much today, again, I think, as I said, I think what they really tried to do was take a lot of the philosophy, not all of it, with the character, and really have that be at the centerpiece of what they take from the comics. And of course, there are nods to the comics. There are, characters like Lucifer's brother, fellow angel, former angel, Amdiel, the character of Mazakine, from what I understand, is also from the comics. And there's this one part where Lucifer kind of goes on this big rant about how humanity blames him for all of its misfortunes, which, according to people who are much more familiar with the source material than I am, is almost word for word from the comics. So it's not like the people who make the show haven't done their homework on it. They're just, you know, by what they had, kind of a little constrained by what they had to do to actually get this show on TV. But as things go on, I had the feeling that we'll sort of start to see maybe more and more elements from the comics kind of creep in now that the show has been renewed for a second season. And as usual, um, well, let's take a step back. One thing I've said again and again in my reviews is that new TV shows always take a few episodes to kind of figure themselves out. It always takes the actors a few episodes to kind of really sink into their characters, and Lucifer is no exception. Also, the thing with new TV shows, especially, is that the first few episodes are generally going to be very, very formulaic. They're going to be very similar sort of stories. And that's so that people who are just sort of watching the show and making up their minds whether or not they like it don't have to get too wrapped up in complicated ideas, and you can really focus more on introducing them to characters, setting up the basis for this world, and you just basically you want to keep all of that as simple as possible. So for the first few episodes, the show is, as I said, very, very formulaic. It's, Lucifer and the female cop going out there and solving some kind of a mystery. But once that kind of gets rolling, they once they've had enough time to kind of get people comfortable with, hey, this is the basic idea that we're going with, then they kind of start to add in more of the supernatural elements. They kind of expand more on the conflict between heaven and hell that's going on here, and it gets a lot more interesting. Um, So, with that said, let's just kind of talk briefly about some of the characters here. Just sort of because I can never remember actors' names, I'm just kind of calling it up here. You gotta love the guy that plays Lucifer. He's this actor named by the name of Tom Ellison. This is Tom Ellis, I should say. This is the first thing I've ever seen him in, but oh man, he is so good as Lucifer. I mean, he is really fun, extremely charming. I mean, there's a little bit of a Tom Hiddleston vibe on him, and you can't help but in a way think that if they hadn't got him to play Loki, that Tom Ellis would have been a great second choice. But you know, uh, English actors playing smarmy, rather villainous characters who have understandable and likable qualities as well. With Lucifer being much more on the heroic side than Loki, of course, it is not hard to see some similarities. But again, Tom Ellis just does a fantastic job. And, he's, of course, the character that the show is anchored in, but he just handles it marvelously. I mean, this guy is just fantastic. I love the guy. Now, the female cop that we have on the show, again, original character, named Chloe Decker. What I like about her is that she's somebody who you're putting putting her side to side with the devil, but she really does stand firm and doesn't. Well, she basically really has no problem standing alongside Lucifer as an equal. She's somebody who really, at best, tolerates his nonsense and can actually give and take just about as good as he can. So she's a very worthy partner for him. And she sort of does serve as his main connection to humanity because there's a lot of stuff going on with Chloe as a character by herself. She's got stuff going on with her daughter. She's got stuff going on with her ex-husband. Her ex-husband has some interesting things going on, and it all comes together in a very interesting mix that sort of builds around as the season goes along. And it's very easy to understand why, for various reasons, Lucifer becomes intrigued with this lady. And again, it just goes from there, and it's really well done. I also kind of liked some of the other supernatural characters that they introduced. Mazikeen. Now, this is, I said, a character from the comics, but not one that was in anything that I read. But she's also an interesting character, and she's sort of Lucifer's right-hand girl, pretty much the only person that came with him when he left Hell, and she's the one who's just like, Lucifer, Earth sucks. Let's go back to Hell. But again, there's more to her than that. What I really like was the actor D.B. Woodside, who plays his brother, an angel from heaven, who's sort of like, hey, Lucifer, God wants you to go back to hell. Get your ass out of L.A. and go back to hell already. And what's great about this guy is I remember him as Robin Wood from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that show has remained had a special place in my heart for a very very long time. So seeing him here on the show, getting an interesting and fun character to play was a really nice treat. And again, um, this angel with the really hard name that I'm not even going to try and pronounce, he's also got his own stuff going on. He's got his conflicts. He's got his flaws, and his relationship with Lucifer is very very core. It's what's going on the more supernatural side of things, and well, I kind of think that doesn't exactly cover it. I haven't really talked very much about some of the characters, like particularly Dan, Chloe's ex-husband, who is a very big part of all of this. And and I haven't also said very much about sort of the supernatural side, the conflicts and dramas going there, because I don't want to spoil stuff for you guys. But both of those aspects of the show, the sort of the police drama on the one side and the supernatural drama on the other, are very intriguing. And as time goes by and you get invested in the show, you're really like, man, what exactly is going on here? And then by the time you get to the final episodes and a lot of stuff comes out, it's like, ooh, wow, I did not expect that. And, ooh dear, that's not good. And this all builds to this really great climax at the end of the series, and it's hard not to, well, let's just say that the last line of the season finale is like, oh man, I want season 2 now. So let's take a step back. At the end of the day, Lucifer is a show that does take some from the comics, but really is its own beast. Now, is it Lucifer in name only? Well, I don't think I've read enough of the comics to really make that judgment. But yeah, clearly it's just borrowing little snips here and there, and that's just the way the entertainment industry works. But if you take the TV show on its own merits, Lucifer's a lot of fun. I mean, the actors are clearly having a good time. The writers, once they kind of had the time to sort of figure out where they were going with the show and get in a comfortable groove, really make a good hour of TV. And as I said, the show just gets stronger and stronger as the season goes along. And by the time you get to the season finale, you're like, okay, man, this is good stuff. I am definitely in for more. And this certainly isn't going to do any harm to sales of the various collections of the old Lucifer comics. I have a feeling a lot of people who are going to watch this show and enjoy it are probably going to go give the original stories a try and find something very, very different, but still something very enjoyable and compelling. After all, Neil Gaiman is much beloved among comic fans for many reasons, chief among them being he's a very, very, very good writer. So if you're willing to kind of let the show mostly take the show on its own merits, then I think this is a show that a lot of geeky people will enjoy. And with that said, folks, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and you can also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.